Up to like vector illustration using Inkscape. So we'll talk about Inkscape and how you can use Inkscape. So this class purely practical. I'll be demonstrating to you guys will be following along with experience of illustration. So before we start the practical aspect, today will just be like introduction, definition of something to know what we are working with. Okay. Okay, so we'll start by what is vector illustration. So anyone who has an idea of vector illustration, you have heard the word vector illustration before. Anyone? Okay. So before we define vector illustration, I would like to lay foundation on what vector graphics is. So from vector graphics, we talk about vector illustration. Okay, so vector graphics, they are a type of digital image that is created using mathematical equations rather than pixels. So before I move on, I may be mentioning words like mathematical equation, but we are not solving any math here. It's just the method of using the vector illustration. So before vector graphics came in, what they do to represent image digitally is the use of raster image, which are pixels, which means that to represent a digital image, the computer will have to like break down that image into tiny, tiny squares. That is what we call pixels. So those tiny squares assign color to those tiny squares. So that when those squares come together, now form the image. That is why we can view them with digital device like our phone, our laptop, and even the screen. So before vector graphics came in, we used raster image format. And those raster image format uses pixels. So I don't know if we have played with that on a sliding puzzle before. We have a preview image, and the image will be break down into boxes. I'll be moving the boxes. So that is how raster images represent image, but in more tiny boxes, so that you now assign details to those boxes that we call pixels. That's why in some phone specification, you will see like camera 50 megapixel. Those pixels is the amount of boxes the computer will create for that particular image. So unlike Raster images that uses pixel in the format of JPEG, and JPEG is Joint Photographic Expert Group, and PNG is Portable Network Graphics and the likes. So those are the format of raster images. Unlike the raster images, the vector graphic uses mathematical equations, that is shapes, lines, curves, squares. So they use mathematical equations to represent an image. The raster image has some disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is that it loses quality when you I know most of us have tried to zoom in some photos on our image on our phone. When you zoom in, you will see some blurriness, just like what we have here. We won't show you enough details. This blurriness is actually those tiny squares that it is being broken down into. But there are so many, that's why our eyes are just looking at them as if they are blurry. So that's how they do represent image digitally before vector graphics. Another downside is that when it's being scaled up, it has large file format. So when you scale it up too much, the format of the file will increase. For instance, if you have an image that is the size of this TV, I want to display that image on a billboard. You know that you have to increase the size of the image to fit that clipboard. So increasing that size will lead to increase in large file format, and also it will end up being blurry like this. That is why they introduce vector graphics that you can scale it up to any size and it won't end up being blurry and it won't lose any image quality. So in order to fix the blurriness and the raster image when it is scaled up, vector graphics is now introduced. So vector graphics uses nodes, lines, curves, and shapes to represent images. We can now scale up image to any size. So once you are working with vector graphics, you can scale up image to any size and you won't lose any of the quality and you won't end up with large file format. So the vector graphics also has its own disadvantages. And one of the disadvantages is that digital screens, just like the TV, our laptops, and our phone, they can only represent an image with pixels. So if you convert the image to a vector file, that is, you have used lines, curves, and shapes to represent that image. After converting it into a vector graphics, it will have to convert it back into pixel for it to be able to show on screens like this. Because the screens are made up of tiny boxes, they don't have shapes and curves. So they will have to be converted back to pixel to be in order to show on screen just like this. And another disadvantage of using vector graphics is that it's not well suitable for photos. So, especially photos with human face, if you try to convert normal image into vector graphics, to end up losing some details, just like this image you see here. This is an attempt of converting a normal raster image in either JPEG, PNG, or whatever format into a vector graphic. You can see that the details are not that clear. There's a lot of missing details because human face especially have a lot of complex color gradients and fine details. So it is very hard for the system to represent a JPEG file or a raster image into a vector file. So it will end up being something like this, which is not looking anything like the original image. So in order to vectorize or convert a raster image or a JPEG file into a vector illustration, especially those with human face, it has to be done manually. So the computer cannot guess the correct color patterns on human face, especially. So it will end up being scattered like that image we saw previously. So to do that, humans have to go manually and look at the image, identify the shapes on the face, identify the color gradient and complex variation on the face in order to convert it into a vector format. So that is where vector illustration comes in. So vector illustration is a method of creating digital artwork by that is made up of points or nodes, lines, curves, and shapes, with positions relative to each other defined mathematically. It uses mathematical equations to describe its dimension, position, and property. So the act of a human going into those images to identify those shapes, those lines, and those curves on an image to convert them into a vector graphics is known as vector illustration. So vector illustration is also used for logos, infographics, icon, animation, t-shirt design, and so on. Although the main aim of vector illustration is to completely convert image, especially human faces that doesn't have enough detail, into a vector graphic. But they end up using it to create logos, to create infographics, icons, animation, and so on. So there are a lot of softwares that we can use to create these vector graphics. We have softwares like Corridor, we have Adobe Illustrator, and Inkscape. But in this class, we'll be looking at using Inkscape into creating a vector file format. So why are we using Inkscape? Why are we not using other software just like all these ones that are here? The reason is that Inkscape is a free and open source design software. Like you can see here, softwares like Corridor and Adobe Illustrator, you can see that Adobe Illustrator charge close to about $30 per month just for subscription for you to gain access into the file. But Inkscape here is totally free. You just need to download it and install it on your system. That is all. You don't need any license issues. Whatever artwork, whatever design you create on Inkscape is fully for you. You can use it both for your personal use and also commercial use. So in this class, we'll be looking at how we will use Inkscape into creating vector graphics. So we'll start by installing Inkscape on our system. So anyone have Inkscape on their system already? Okay, so we'll pass the flash around to install the Inkscape. If you have access to network, then just downloading it while we pass the flash. All right. All right, so those they have it, just install it because of the power by Friday, we have another class from 2 p.m. also. And if you want to install it, you can